I told you I was fired up for this one, and with good reason. Love talking with Brett Kollman. Check him out on social media at Brett Kollmann. He is the man of all hats on the film room on YouTube. He's basically a YouTube star. I mean, is that fair to say, Brett, that you're a YouTube star?
You know, I just like to think of myself as a dude who sits in a spare bedroom watching film and trying to make something that makes sense every single week, you know?
How did you get into it? I forget.
Well, I actually worked on the NFL media side of things. And, you know, these videos originally were like proof of concepts for my producers over at NFL Network. And originally I wasn't supposed to be, you know, the on-air talent or anything. It was like, oh, let's do this video about like how LaDainian reads inside zone, or like, you know, Bill Belichick's defense where Willie was the elephant, and all the different, you know, stuff he'd have to do against certain certain personnel groupings and stuff, like really nitty gritty detailed X's and O's stuff. And it just never really materialized for TV because it didn't fit TV. But all of the videos that I was just kind of doing as proof of concept, like not necessarily like for me, ended up taking off. And it got to the point where my wife was like, hey, you're not even trying at this and it's growing. What happens if you actually try? And so my last day at NFL Network was the day before the Patriots Falcons Super Bowl. And that was like 7 years ago now. And ironically, I am back to working with the NFL this season, doing the content that I was basically originally pitching, but now for the NFL YouTube channel, in addition to stuff for my own. So it all kind of came full circle in the end.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know you were back working for them.
Yeah. We did a few projects together. You know, kind of a JJ Watt career retrospective, a Brock Purdy breakdown, like a couple games into his career. And I'm going down to Phoenix for Super Bowl to record a film breakdown of some all 22 that's never really been seen publicly of the Spags when he was the Giants DC in 2007 when they beat the Patriots. They gave me the all 22 for that game, and I'm going to Phoenix to record a film breakdown of exactly like how Spags constructed that game plan. Because, you know, it's Spags is back in the Super Bowl in that same stadium again. So again, all kind of came full circle. And yeah, so that's gonna be a cool project I'm working on for them.
That is cool. So I guess before I forget, um, give me something on those two projects you already did. So tell me, in your mind, what made JJ Watt so good?
I mean, you know, this is a former offensive lineman. The fact that there's really no good answer against him on we'll start with the run game on zone runs. Like you can't really overplay him front side because he was quick enough to backdoor you, which is super rare. And so if you kind of like go at him vertically to keep him from backdooring you, he's quick enough that he can still win front side and get TFLs that way. So you know, running zone away from him was virtually impossible. Oh, and by the way, he's 6'5", 300, so you can't run directly at him because he's going to stack and shed. And then he's going to get you into 3rd and 7, and he can rush from a anywhere from a 2-eye all the way up to a 9, and he's better than everybody else there too. Like he was literally the perfect defensive football player that you could line him up anywhere. He could do anything. And very, very few offensive linemen, like unless your name was Tyron Smith, you really just weren't athletic enough to keep up with him at any spot. It's going to be you know, a long time before I think we see another 5 technique that looks like him.
It's funny when you say perfect defensive player could line up anywhere and do anything. The first thing came to my head was actually Micah Parsons,
Oh
who's
yeah,
a different player, but like, I think Micah could play some safety. You know, I wouldn't put corner past him. I've seen him actually play corner like in like 7-on-7s and like at camps. It's crazy. Like it's crazy how effortlessly he seemingly can play anywhere.
there's 2 inside linebackers in the entire league that I would, two linebackers, period, in the entire league that I would trust to be like a Tampa 2 dropper against a wide receiver, deep in the middle. One of them is Fred Warner, and the other is Micah, and he's a freaking edge. Like the fact that he can go from, beating pretty much any tackle in the league other than Lane, in a pass rush rep, and then the next play be that Tampa 2 dropper and have it seem so natural. He's like the only guy that can do that. It's exceptionally rare.
It's a great point. What about Purdy? What did you notice? It's obviously going to be a big conversation this offseason after the surgery. It sounds like he'll have on his forearm, his elbow area, the UCL. What was your breakdown of Purdy? What did you think of him? Because obviously, there's still very mixed opinions on Purdy.
The big thing with him, and he's a fascinating story because so I'm out in Vegas for the Shrine Bowl right now. Looking at a whole bunch of draft prospects. It's a great event out here in Vegas, and Purdy was in this game last year, and we're watching him in practice for the week, and he really didn't look that good. And then I go to 49ers camp like 8 months later, and he was, fair to say in a lot of drills other than 2 minute, he was the best Niners quarterback on the field in training camp. And it was wild to kind of see that that growth in him over such a short period of time, because it's not an easy offense to master. Like I've looked through some old Kyle playbooks before from his Atlanta days, and like every single route has 5 different conversions that it could have, based on different pre and post snap looks. There's a million different protections. The verbiage of the offense, like calling plays in the huddle, is not easy. You're spitting out like 30 words. It's a really tough offense for a rookie to get thrown in there essentially, and all of a sudden be undefeated until the NFC Championship game. In terms of skill set, on top of kind of mastering that offense pretty quickly, the thing that separated him to me from Garoppolo, not necessarily from Lance. Lance is more physically talented, but the reason why they were better with him than Garoppolo was the fact that he's just so quick. Like that 1-5-5 10-yard split really shows up in a messy pocket, because he wasn't taking the same sacks that Jimmy was. The drive killing sacks. Like he was really good at avoiding those negative plays. And if he could just get one guy to miss, he was also really good at getting his eyes immediately back downfield and just finding anybody as an outlet. And so their overall offensive efficiency skyrocketed because they never went backwards. Like very rarely did they go backwards. And so you combine that with his, offensive mastery and the poise and the confidence and everything like that. And all of a sudden you get, the guy who looked like the best rookie quarterback, and you happen to get him with the last pick of the draft. It's a really fun story and super rare and unique for it to happen.
Let's dive into the Super Bowl now, Brett, because love your breakdowns. Let's start when the Eagles have the ball. Is there something in particular that you'll be looking at there that you're really interested in?
I'm very curious to see, how the Chiefs schematically play against them, because if you look at kind of like all the different coverage statistics, the Chiefs pretty much never call cover 3. They are 32 out of 32 in the league in terms of calling cover 3. It's at like 16%. The average, if I recall correctly, was the Ravens at like 33%. They're dead average in the league. There are some teams, like any Gus Bradley defense, is going to be at like 60%, right? So the Chiefs pretty much never call it. If they start getting run on and they want to drop an extra body down, they're playing man coverage. Like it's cover 1 all day. And I don't know if they really want to do that against the Eagles, because A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are absolute superstars, and they're playing almost an entirely rookie secondary out there that I don't necessarily think can hold up against those go balls deep down the boundary, because Hurts is statistically been the best thrower of go balls outside the numbers in the entire league this year. So you combine his accuracy downfield with A.J. Brown being a monster, with rookie corner. I think what the Chiefs are going to do is lean into what they were already doing this year, which is a lot of cover 2. A lot of cover 2. Like they're one of the heaviest cover 2 defenses in the entire league, I think, because of how young their secondary is. And that presents an entirely different problem, because if you're in 11 personnel, which the Eagles are in a lot, and you're running split zone against a cover 2 look and the safety's like 12, 15 yards back, you don't have the bodies as a defense to stop that. Like you're basically just giving up 5 yards. And I know that, okay, we're willing to give up 5 and 5 and 5 and 5 and 5 to prevent those go balls to AJ, but like the Eagles will take that. Like they will run 35 times on you if you let them. And so eventually the Chiefs are going to have to find the answer to stop all this inside zone that the Eagles major in. They run it more than basically everybody else, but they're going to have to do it without playing cover 1. Like they're going to have to do the one coverage that they don't like doing, and that's cover 3. And so I'm fascinated to see if they make that adjustment because it's something they haven't done all year.
Doesn't it seem on some level, Brett, like Hurts didn't really play that great against the Giants or the 49ers? I feel like if I'm going to pick a poison against the Eagles, I'm probably going to pick and hope that Hurts is off again and maybe take my chances with some of those go balls in man-to-man coverage. And you might get burned, but it's almost like you're playing against a team and you got to hope that their outside shot is off that night in basketball because they're so good down low.
Yeah, I agree with it. I would at least try it early, right? Just to see what they do. See if the Eagles can execute. Because if they're beating you that way, then fine. It is, fair play, tip your hat, have fun with your ring. But at least be aggressive early and force them to beat you with those shots just to test it and see if it works. Because if they're not hitting it, like you said, and then you got an extra body down there to stop inside zone, all of a sudden they don't really have anything else, right? Their offense is pretty, I don't want to call it like simplistic, but they do what they do, and they kind of out talent everybody. But if you can kind of scheme your way into stopping that fastball, and I don't know if they really have a breaking ball.
What about the other side with the Chiefs on offense? How do you see them attacking the Eagles? And what do you think the Eagles are going to do defensively to try to slow down Kelsey?
This is another thing that fascinates me, and you're based in Philly, so maybe you know this. Did Vic already leave, or is he still working as a consultant for them and developing this game plan? Because he was a huge factor in game planning for Gannon, right? And you could see Vic Fangio's defensive fingerprint all over this unit. Like they played more early down quarters than anybody else in the entire league, and that's a Fangio thing. And so what I'm trying to figure out, and I've got a few feelers out there, is like with all this Fangio defensive coordinator interviewing and hiring, all like, is he actually working on the Super Bowl? Because I think the game plan that I expect from Philly is going to be a lot different if he is compared to if he isn't. If they just kind of stick with what they were doing with Vic, I would expect a lot of quarters. And the Chiefs, I think, are a pretty dangerous team to run that against because, again, if all their receivers are healthy, we don't know if they are. It pretty much all becomes man-to-man coverage down the field, right? And even though I love the Eagles secondary outside, like their corners, both of these safeties, I'm not necessarily sure they can run with MVS on that deep post that Pat can hit. I'm not necessarily sure that they can cover Travis Kelce running a deep 7, which they're going to have to do. Like it's a pretty tough matchup inside more than outside. So those are my two questions: is how involved is Vic? And if he's not involved, are they going to run the same stuff they were before?
Well, I'd have to think they're going to run the same stuff. I can't imagine that they would change that. And I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how involved, he's been really all year. And certainly now that he's got all these job offers, I know that in the preseason, he was there. He was there all the time and certainly was there in camp. And I think, helped observe and have his input on what they were doing defensively for sure. I don't know, what his level of involvement's been all season, and certainly in the playoffs and leading up to the Super Bowl. Now that he's got all these other job offers.
We know at least you know, based on some people that I've talked to, that, and when I was consulting with them in terms of like looking at what they were doing, like he was pretty heavily involved week to week during the year. Um, it was mostly remote. He was in Philly obviously for camp and everything like that. Doing installs and stuff. But during the year, from what I've heard, he was pretty heavily involved. Um, Not that this wasn't Gannon's defense, like it's Gannon's defense, but in terms of getting insight in terms of how to run certain things, like what are we putting on the sheet for that week, like Vic was there helping out, and so I think there will be a pretty massive difference if he's not for like the biggest game of the year. But if they do just kind of stick with what they were doing before, I would expect it to be a pretty quarters heavy defense, and we'll see how the Chiefs react to that, which is probably going to depend on how many receivers they have available.
Last question, Brett. Maybe it's an obvious one, maybe not. You've watched a lot of Patrick Mahomes. Is there something about him that people don't realize? Is there something about him that you see that maybe others don't?
He was really, over the last, not even just this year, but over the last 2 years, he's been very comfortable with just kind of taking what a defense gives him. It kind of feels like early in the career, it took a while to get the Texas Tech out of him, in terms of like taking the shots, like feeling like he has to win on every single play to get a touchdown because like Texas Tech didn't have a defense. And I feel like he grew up never having a defense and he always had to make the play, and he would do this hero ball stuff and get in trouble. But over the last 2 seasons, with Tyreek and without, he's gotten really comfortable with just doing 11, 12 play drives, being very efficient, being very accurate, getting the ball out quick. His sack numbers are way down, despite the fact that his two tackles were two of the top four tackles in the entire league in terms of giving up pressures. His sack percentage was way down because of how efficient he is at just getting the ball out quick. Obviously, the mobility plays a factor too. We'll see what his ankle is like in the Super Bowl. If it's anything like what it was in the championship game, he's probably going to be fine. But it's just the efficiency and the willingness to lean into the quick game that he didn't have before. It's honestly made him a better quarterback. And even without Tyreek Hill, this was the best version of the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes offense because of that willingness to just be efficient.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Make sure you check this man out on social media like I do. Again, it's at Brett, BRETTKOLLMANN. Check out his stuff on NFL Network that's coming up. And of course, the Film Room on YouTube. Excellent stuff, Brett. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you for having me.